This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of The Edge, Trek FM's dedicated podcast to Star Trek Discovery. I'm your host, Amy Nelson, and with me today, Brandon-Shea Mutala. Brandon, how are you doing?
I don't know. I'm feeling kind of crazy. I'm having these weird dreams, and I'm all scared and worried, and I just think I must have to. I think I just got to break somebody's neck.
Well, hopefully it's not mine. I won't confront you in sickbay at all.
Okay, good.
Well, we have two guests with us. Maybe they could be alter egos of themselves. Patrick Devlin from Warp 5 and Lee Hutchison, former host of Earl Grey. Patrick, welcome.
Hey, thanks.
You've been on past couple of weeks, so nice to have you back.
Yeah, it's been fun talking about Discovery. More fun than I thought it was going to be, so.
Oh, well, good. And Lee, I'm so glad to be back on mic with you. How are you?
Yes, I know it's an absolute buzz. Yeah, when I got, there was a wee round robin a few weeks ago about this episode, and there was a certain element that was teased by Brandon that we want someone with an interest in this certain topic, and I was like, yep, sounds right up my street as a professional, not just as a fan. So yeah, I'm particularly excited to be with you all today.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've recorded a podcast with you, Lee, since we did 09 on Melodic Treks, have we?
Yes, I think it's been certainly a wee while. So yes, I'm excited to be back together with you as well.
Yes. We just have not crossed paths, so this is going to be fun.
Life is that way sometimes.
So we do have some current news. Brandon, you want to start us off?
We are thrilled to report that Star Trek Discovery has been nominated for 5 Saturn Awards. And so that's pretty cool. But not only has the series itself received a Saturn Award, but Sonequa Martin Green, Doug Jones, Jason Isaac, and Michelle Yeoh have also been recognized by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. So the nominations were Best New Media TV Series, Best TV Actress for Sonequa Martin Green, Best TV Actor for Jason Isaacs, Best Supporting TV Actor for Doug Jones, and Best TV Guest Star for Michelle Yeoh. So that's pretty cool. The 44th Annual Saturn Awards will be presented in June in Burbank, California. So that's pretty prestigious, I think, for the show to get 5 nominations in its first season. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's always good to be nominated, and hopefully it can take home the prizes that it deserves. I don't really know much about the Saturn Awards personally, so I'm going to just assume it's going to win.
Yeah, that's quite possible. Patrick, Amy, what do you think of that?
I think it's great. I mean, you always want to see the show getting accolades, and that'll help keep it on the air. And if it's getting this much attention as a streaming show, that's always a good thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And a Best New Media TV Series, that's pretty cool because there have been some pretty good TV series coming on. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. The other piece of news that we have, so we're recording this on the 22nd here, and just last week there's been a new Star Trek Discovery comic that's come out. It's the first part of a Mirror Universe saga for the Star Trek Discovery Mirror Universe. So I haven't had a chance to read it, but images of it have been making the rounds all over social media. So I eagerly anticipate picking it up, and I'm looking very much forward to it. As last week we did cover one of the comics. We did just cover the annual on our last episode of The Edge. So that's it, what we have for news right now. But everybody listening, make sure you stay tuned to the very end after the previously on Trek FM, as we've got a couple of announcements to make for the show. So I guess that's all we got for news right now.
All right. Well, then let's get on to our main discussion. We are going to have a great discussion about Ash Tyler. Now, I was wondering, are you wanting to talk about Voq along with Ash Tyler, or just limit it to Ash Tyler?
I think we can't do one without the other. I think they've got to both be together myself. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have to talk both.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm interested to know, what are your initial thoughts about this Voq Ash Tyler character? Lee, let's start with you.
Yeah, I suppose I kind of go back to the early days of when all these people were being announced, that for kind of genre fans, people like Doug Jones, I never watched Walking Dead, but Sonequa Martin Green, Michelle Yeoh, Jason Isaacs, a lot of these people are instantly recognizable to genre fans of science fiction, fantasy, of like, oh, I know that person from Harry Potter and such like. I think Shazad Latif, when he was announced, was someone that I think probably most American audiences and international audiences would be familiar with. And probably the same with the UK. But for me, he was Clem Fandango in the programme Toast of London. It's this really good comedy series here in the UK. And when I saw that he was announced, it was like, oh, that's fantastic. It felt like one of these people, like, it was like someone that was on my team, someone I was really happy to see involved in Star Trek, going from that show to the other. I think you can find it on Netflix. So, it was a bit frustrating having to, in a way, wait 4 or 5 episodes to actually get our first glimpse of Shazad Latif as Ash Tyler. But my kind of initial thoughts of him as, kind of overall, and really was that it was such an exciting character, but with perhaps some frustrating creative choices with him. I think Shazad Latif as Ash Tyler is definitely one of the star performers of the first season of Star Trek Discovery, and I think he became one of my most interesting and kind of debated characters. So I think that was a success for me.
Yeah, agreed. Patrick?
He's one of my favorite characters of the show. I loved when he entered, the way he came in, that he was supposedly being tortured for 7 months and survived, and he was looking for somebody to help get him out, and the reveals we see at the end where, well, that's not exactly what happened. They just kind of made him believe that kind of stuff, and he was like how do I explain it? I've been trying to explain this for like 3 days to my wife, and she hasn't gotten it yet. But how they layered a memory on top of a memory. They didn't erase one and all that. I think he's the most interesting character in the show to me, and he's my favorite character in the show.
Excellent. Brandon?
I like him as well. I gotta say that I did not suspect at all the dual personality and what was going on. The only reason that I was made aware of it was because of all the stuff going on social media. And honestly, until it was actually like truly revealed in the show, I still had my doubts as to whether or not Tyler was going to be Voq. It was all over online. And I think the biggest difficulty that they had with that secret is, today's technology and having easy access to things like IMDb and, instantaneous records online of people's careers and what they've done. And a lot of people say that they figured it out right away and they could tell right from the episode, but I personally couldn't. And I think it was well done. I think the reveal when we finally got to it, that he was Voq, was a pretty amazing reveal. But the one frustrating thing that I have about this when I look back on it now is that this plot point is the reason that they reinvented the Klingons and their look. Now, I personally don't have a problem with the Klingons and how they look, but had they not reinvented the look of the Klingons, they would not have been able to pull this off. Because
why do you say that?
If they just had, like, how Worf is?
Yeah.
Like, if they had, let's pretend this was Michael Dorn was on The Next Generation, and we had seen him as Worf for a while, and then all of a sudden Michael Dorn shows up on the bridge of the Enterprise. We would know that it's the same actor. Mm-hmm. Right?
But then surely they would just turn around and go, right, he'll just be a different actor at the beginning. It could be Joe Blogs from Hollywood. Right, let's get him in for 4 episodes, and then in a few episodes' time, I think there's ways completely around it for sure.
Right, but in the case of this is, I think, why they did the redesign of the Klingons, and to make them look completely different. This way their faces are completely covered with entire prosthetics, so that it is completely unrecognizable. And when you see him as a human, you're not seeing that it's the same person because the makeup was so heavy as a Klingon. And this is also why they made the decision to have the Klingons speak Klingon. Is literally not literally, sorry, but like the reason why they have them speak Klingon is for the reveal. So when L'Rell starts making that chant and he responds in Klingon, the only way he could know Klingon is if he was Klingon. So it's the creative choices that they made were there for the reveal.
I disagree with you there. I think like these creative choices were probably always going to be made going into sort of a new Star Trek series, regardless of continuity. That I think with these that they managed to make such a truly alien look. And I think that in this kind of current climate where audiences are maybe get a bit more respect for being intelligent in this sort of HBO world where people can accept people speaking perhaps in a foreign tongue or language. I think that was always going to be the way that they were going to present the Klingons, to make them seem kind of very different to sort of the more human kind of Klingons that we got, even with the Klingon makeup, that they would speak in kind of American English. I think that was always going to happen. I think it's an interesting kind of hypothesis, but I always feel this was what they were going to do regardless of kind of going down the road of Ash Tyler, was making the Klingons alien again.
Well,
Patrick, what do you think?
Well, even if we take your theory as to be just absolute truth, I don't think it's necessarily a negative. I like them speaking Klingon. So even if it was,
I do too. I love it. I remember after watching the first 2 episodes, Chris Obi and the way that he spoke, I absolutely love how he spoke, and I really do love the sound of the Klingon language. I'm not saying that it's a negative at all that they chose to do this. The only negative that I have with the Klingon language and their choice to use it was just how quickly the subtitles were coming up on screen. I'm no stranger to foreign films. Like I've got the first 650 titles in the Criterion collection on Blu-ray and DVD, right? I've seen my fair share. I'm used to watching subtitled films, and I had trouble keeping up with the subtitles myself. I think that the font they used and the pace at which they were appearing on screen was just a little too rapid, and the font wasn't that good. But again, I'm not saying that it's a bad choice. I'm just saying, standing back and looking at it, I think that this is why they made those choices, was simply to fulfill this reveal in a shocking way.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't really know, but I don't think it matters to me either way. I just like the way it all came about. The Klingon look has never bothered me. They've changed so many times now that it is what it is, and I can accept it. And then the like you said, it is a little hard to read with the way they pace it out on the screen. It's even harder now that I'm trying to read it to my 7-year-old and him understand what I'm saying, and then I'm like skipping words and trying to summarize some of the sentences just because I know what they're saying, But other than that, yeah, I like it. And I was on with Amy actually on Postcards just before, 2 episodes before the break. So that's episode 8, right? The Pavin one. And we were talking about how we actually hoped he wasn't Volk. I had said that on that podcast, but now that it's come to fruition, I like the way they did it. So I take back the fact that I wish he wasn't.
Mm-hmm. It's a great reveal. It is a really good reveal, though.
Yeah.
Amy, what do you think, though? Do you think that they only did this simply to service this plot point?
No, I can see your point, though, and appreciate that. But I like how I figured it was that they were doing this to make the Klingons seem more foreign. Like, here's this culture. We've seen them so much, I have in TNG where they're members of the Federation. And so I think to make that break and more in line with TOS, like, here is this completely different culture, and how can we separate it? How can we make it seem more foreign? How can we make the war with the Klingons be more antagonistic, I guess, if you will? Is they've got their own language, their own look, their own ceremonies.
Traditions?
Yeah, traditions. Yeah, their own traditions and ceremonies and what have you, this whole sarcophagus ship. And they're just really getting back to this Kalis idea. And so I think that juxtaposition between what we see on screen with the language and that culture really differentiates that from Starfleet. And so we have this very foreign entity that we're being drawn into. And so I think that was the purpose of that. But I like, that it does help the reveal be more that shocking.
And I think it ties in with what we kind of get with the Klingons through the whole of the first season of Discovery is like they want the Klingon Empire to be pure. And I think that having them sort of look perhaps like their original series and later Enterprise Klingons and speaking in English would have gone against that, whereas like keep Klingons pure and, the Klingon traditions and stuff. I feel that would have kind of been a bit laughable if they were saying that in an English accent while looking very much perhaps like me and you, but with a bit more of a tan.
Right.
Right. And even later on in the series when Burnham's on the bridge, they're talking and he says, "You speak Klingon," and she holds up the universal translator. Because that's when they gave up on just trying to give us Klingon. And we didn't have to read it. So they introduced the universal translator at that moment to still make us realize, oh, he's still speaking just Klingon. The battle cry throughout the whole first season is remain Klingon. So It wouldn't make sense for them to break and speak English or any.
But in the show, though, we didn't have Orions speaking Orion or Andorians speaking Andorian, right? The only other language that we saw was the Klingons. Now, I realize that they were the primary focus of the season, right? They were the primary initial antagonists of the whole season-long arc, and they were the ending antagonists of the season-long arc. But they were the only ones that we saw that language for.
Yeah, but I don't think
we're not going to solve this issue here. We're not going to come to consensus here. It's all our own, personal points of view on it. And I'm fine that you guys don't think that. That's okay. It's okay.
No, I actually think you might be right. I just don't think I care too much about why they did it. I'm just glad they did it.
Brandon, it sounded like you had something that you wanted to talk specifically about.
Did we want to jump into that right away, though? Yeah, there is something that I want to talk about, and it's after the conversion, right? I mean, once he's walking around as Tyler, and we know that he was Ash, the fact that Saru gives him liberty to be walking around the ship, I think is completely bonkers, as a command decision, because yes, this guy has the personality of Ash Tyler, and this opens up an interesting discussion, but he's not. He's Voq. He is Voq. Doesn't matter that he doesn't look like him. They've filed off his fingers and sawed off his bones and stuff, but he is a Klingon who has the personality of a human laminated over top of him.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, but
absolutely.
Is that completely true? Is he still just Voq? Because what makes you who you are? Is it who you're born or the culmination of your upbringing, your memories, and your experiences? Because they implanted experiences on Ash Tyler. They implanted memories on Ash Tyler. So,
and then L'Rell as well used that thing as well to remove the Voq part from it as well. So,
but she didn't remove the Voq part. The Voq part is there. He can still access everything. Right?
See, that's
of course, but still, that it wasn't going to be able to overwhelm it. It was something that he had control over eventually. Well, that we see on screen anyway.
So that's the question, right? Is whether, because Voq is definitely still there, and this is the part that gets confusing, is that both personalities and experiences are there and separate. So now that he knows, they're coming together and they're actually fighting with inside him. But which one is more dominant, I guess, would be the question, and which one does he control as who can... Man, I've been having this conversation for 3 days. I still haven't gotten it right. So which personality is dominant and which personality is controlling the other personality is really the question here. Because... Go ahead, Amy. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's the question, and that I think Saru assumes that Tyler is in control. And if that's the case, then I agree that Saru should let him walk around. So I agree with Saru. It's just a matter of, and I ask the question to you guys, do you believe that Tyler is in control into which memory, which person he is choosing to be?
I think with where I look at it, and I think about a month ago, this email went round, I think, Brandon, you asked, like, I'd love to get someone on the show that believes Ash Tyler should be able to kind of work as a security officer, essentially, after everything that's kind of gone on here, like get back to duty. And that kind of struck a chord with me because, like, my line of work is that I'm an employment advisor. Like, I work in this sort of field, helping people that have had a disability, mental health trauma, physical trauma, whatever, help them get back to work. And the Ash Tyler situation is something, in a ridiculous way, it's somewhat relatable to what I do day to day. So I was looking at, like, that situation, and I was thinking, right, how that person, you know, has gone through a trauma, has mental health issues, but wants to get back to work. What's the best way to do that? And I somewhat disagree with perhaps how quickly it was rushed in the sort of the series. Admittedly, it's in a war situation. They're under a lot of duress, and there's issues that kind of force things to happen. But I think the ultimate process of that, whether that was a bit rushed in the series or not, would have been Ash Tyler returning to work. And I think he, with the right amount of support, whether that would be kind of counseling, for example, you know, an advisor, for example, helping him be the person that he is and help him do the job that he is qualified and experienced to do, that he should be entitled to do that. Obviously, in this situation where there's a Klingon inside him or something, makes it a bit of an odd one. But I think that, you know, he is, like, he should be. Like, if he came to my office tomorrow, knocked on my door, came in for a meeting, I would work on a plan with him to get him back to his job within a period of time. Maybe not within 2 days, but within a period of time. And I think that would be something that would be fair to ask of an employer such as Starfleet in this situation.
I just have such a tough time with that. Like, like this is very different, and we're looking at it from a different point of view. Like, this is science fiction, and this is something that's completely ludicrous that would never happen on our planet. Like, we're not going to have, you know, I don't know, a brown bear, you know, and we're going to genetically change a brown bear to look like a person and then implement my personality on this brown bear. And all of a sudden, you know, it's not really Brandon, it's a brown bear. Like it's something completely ridiculous, right? And, you know, I understand the point of view that you're taking, that it's where we have people with a mental issue, or, you know, they've suffered some type of trauma and they want to get back to their job. They're still them. They're still that person. So you believe
he doesn't have the choice?
I don't know that I do, because that's not who he is. He's a photocopy. Like, the only thing in Star Trek that I can compare this to is B4 at the end of Nemesis. But it's still different, because B4 and Data are basically identical, and they are just a machine. And the thing about Star Trek with people like
someone's clearly never seen Measure of a Man.
Well, that's the thing, okay? So that's the thing about Star Trek. When you have somebody like Data or the Doctor, they are portrayed by real people. And because of the stories that have been told to us, we're attached to them more. So we have different feelings about these characters. If we ever get to the point of artificial intelligence, I don't believe that we will end up with Data or the Doctor. I personally don't think we'll get that far. You may disagree with me, that's fine, right? But even there, it's different, because these are two blank things that are just machines. And if you carbon copy a file of Data's personality, it's still different, because that's still an artificially created file. Right? Where Ash Tyler is a real person, and this is a photocopy of Ash Tyler that's been put on the real being of Voq.
But then again, like, we say that, you know, there's maybe nothing like this kind of comparing on Earth. Well, I think, like, on a certain level of, like, an alien kind of going into human, you know, whatever. But, like, this is very kind of real, because people that have, you know, we talked about, like, and we see it kind of graphically showing, like, the physical trauma and, like, what he was subjected to, and kind of the post-traumatic stress, split personality. These are genuine things that I've encountered in sort of this situation kind of over the past year alone, and, you know, with good frequency really as well. And I think that you make the point of like there's a copy of a copy really, but those memories are real. That this person is, I think, comparing him perhaps to kind of a robot or a hologram doesn't kind of stick with me, because at the end of the day, this person feels pain. He's got emotional feelings. He, despite the fact of how he's come to be, whether he's been grafted on someone, whether he's a cloned individual, you know, all these different things, he is someone that hurts, feels, has hopes, ambitions, and has life experiences, whether that body has lived them or not. He has those. And I think that Ash Tyler is relatable, and I think deserves a shot.
Now, I do actually agree with you a lot, Lee, but just to play devil's advocate, though, when you have split personality disorder, that's something that happened within you from start to finish, whereas in this scenario, someone else gave you that split personality. So the secondary
split personality, for example, you could say, for example, that individuals split personality, for example, could happen at any point in someone's life. You know, touch wood, I've got my health and such like. But, you know, depending on like a traumatic experience, whether physical, mental, whether something happened to me, that could be something that could happen to myself tomorrow. And, you know, while like this situation has come around through kind of a scientific MacGuffin, it's still something that could happen to us. You know, I could come up tomorrow and be sitting there speaking a kind of foreign tongue, almost something that I've kind of got learned knowledge of. Like it's possible that it could happen to us. And I think that it's another relatable aspect of Ash Tyler to kind of modern day.
The only other thing that I can think of is, did you guys ever watch Mad TV?
Yes.
My White Mama. It's like the only other thing I can think of where this, like, you know, it's a comedic skit, and this is different because, you know, this Artie Lang, I think is the actor's name or whatnot. He plays this guy. He runs over this black woman, and her ghost like inhabits him. And so all of a sudden he thinks he's like the mom of this person. He's going around and portraying this black woman as him, right? You know, and it's a comedic sketch and stuff. But I don't know. Like it's such an interesting. It's an interesting argument because I don't know that there is an answer, because it's some completely foreign concept that we have no real equivalent of in our society. And, you know, the topic that I want to compare this to, it's a struggle that I have that I try and understand. Okay. And that's one of the really good things. And I've had a lot of people actually reach out to me. Okay. I've had a lot of private messages, and I've had a few emails and whatnot of people, you know, thanking me for some of the topics that I've brought up in this show, in The Edge. And so one of them that I kind of want to talk about, and the only thing that I can compare it to, is gender identity. Do you guys see any parallel with gender identity in this type of topic? Because I do see it. And I can clarify if you need me to clarify a little bit more, if you're not quite following me here. But it's like, this is a person who's now identifying with a personality that they weren't born with. Right? And there's even a scene when Saru's talking with that doctor, and I wish I could remember the quote because I don't have it written in front of me, where he asks, well, who is he now? Or something like that. And the doctor responds, well, why don't you ask him? You know, and so when I saw that, that's what I felt. I'm like, this story is a synonym for gender identity. That's what I'm getting out of this, you know, because they feel that they are something that they weren't born with.
I disagree there. Like, I can see why someone would kind of draw a parallel there. And I think, yeah, like a case could be argued for it. But I think in the grand scheme, not here. I think that there is I think the representation of, like, say, mental and physical kind of health, I think would be closer, because I think the individuals that go through sort of that trauma, I think those sorts of comments would be also made there, that I don't think it kind of matches up like quite perfectly with gender, for example. I think you do make a good case, but I think that there's definitely a real kind of representation of that kind of mental health, and I think that they do it really well.
I didn't think of it until you just said it, and but I can see where those ideas would come from, and I'm not so sure that didn't at least influenced their way of bringing this about. That it was gender identity that played some role in this. I mean, they made a conscious effort to name Michael Burnham too.
But then I think with, like, say, for example, we talk about, like, well, why don't you ask him? Like, the approach that kind of most mental health kind of professionals, for example, in the UK, I can't speak for the US, would say in a situation like this, when working with sort of any individual with any sort of disability, is we take what would be called like a person-centered approach, where like the individual support, how they like to be supported, the care that they would like to receive is like in the front and center. So it's like, right, how would you like to be kind of referred to? How would you like your disability to be referred to? How would you as an individual like to be acknowledged? Those are sort of things that we would ask anyone, whether it's kind of, say, Asperger's, mental health, physical disability, anything like that, like that person is always at the center of the care. And I think a doctor asking that is like, why don't you ask him? Like, I can see the parallels with gender, but it's also something that a professional would probably take in a sort of mental health, physical situation like this.
Amy, what do you think?
Well, I want to go back, like, why did you make that leap to gender? Because, yeah, with Patrick, I had never even saw it that way. I was more along the lines, like what Leah's saying, with the mental health and like the split personality and, you know, getting to who is this person? Are they able to control which person they are? What choices are they going to make in the future now that these two personalities have merged into one? Like, they're cognizant, they're aware, they're conscious of that other personality. I didn't see gender. So what was it that pushed you to see that as gender?
It was just the way that I wish I had that in front of me right now. It was the way that Saru asked the question, and that doctor, the way that she responded, because I know that it's a thing right now where you're like, you ask people, how do they want to be referred to as a gender? And This is something that I'm trying to grasp and struggle with. And people understand, and at least I hope they do when they listen to me, that I'll talk about sensitive issues because I want to understand, and I don't completely understand. I don't understand how somebody who was born a male or a female could feel that there's something different. I don't understand that. I don't think that's something I can ever understand, but I'm trying to understand. And so when she asked that question, how does he want to be referred to? That's what I heard. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because, you know, I went to the movie theater the other day and there was a person in front of me and they looked like a boy and they had their name tag, and on the name tag, it had him. Underneath the name, it said him. And that was the first time I was confronted with something like that, like out in the public. You know, I didn't have to refer to this person by gender. That was buying popcorn from them, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't, but they had that on there. So this is how this person wants to be referred to. And this is something that's coming up more and more in society. And it's something that I'm now finding. My wife deals with this all the time because she works in a place where she deals with people, students, you know, younger generation of people and whatnot. She's in a test center. And so they got to come to her and they present ID and whatnot. And so she's confronted with this a lot more frequently than I am. You know, I work in an office with 6 other people, right? I'm not confronted with a lot of people. And it's just something that I struggle to grasp. And so hearing that question and the way that it was answered by that doctor just made something click in my mind, you know? And so I don't know, the way it was answered by this doctor is what made the association for me. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting. When I, at school, we have a gay straight alliance club, and the teacher who's over it asked me to come and introduce myself, you know, at the beginning of the year. And one of the things that he said, you know, just tell us who you are, what you teach, and where you are on campus. And then say, I prefer to be addressed as she and her. And that was my first real experience, you know, talking to people and saying, yes, please address me as her and she, you know. So it's definitely out there and is becoming more of a thing, just to say, how do you identify yourself?
Anybody else got anything to add on that? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered it all. Yeah, I guess we kind of covered it all. I mean, I don't know. I didn't think about any of that until now. So I was actually, when it came up about him being Volk and everything, instead of gender identity, I saw more people online worrying about using someone of Middle Eastern descent as a sleeper cell was more of an issue for people. So I thought more about that, because I don't think that was done. I don't think he was picked for that purpose. So I don't think that was done on purpose either. In fact, if you see the only bomber we see in the whole show is Vulcan anyway. So.
And I think that we see like many of the actors that portray Klingons in the series are white as well, and white, black. You know, Shazid Latif. You know, he has got a kind of Middle Eastern descent, but he's a fellow Brit like myself. So yeah, I kind of never really kind of put those two together, but I think that. And I think with the kind of argument I was made, that I think obviously it was rushed, that kind of Ash Tyler was put back in a situation where he was to go back to work. And I think that's somewhat unrealistic as much as that situation can be. But I think that in those final few episodes when he's put back to work is that he acquits himself really well, that he does a job, carries it out, you know, he works as well as part of a team. And that I think that it's a showcase that people with physical and mental disabilities that have gone through trauma with a supportive, you know, network around them can achieve things. And I think that that's something to be admired as well, because like the statistics are damning. For example, that, you know, individuals with disabilities have to like apply for like 40 jobs before they get like a successful job. And as you can imagine, in my type of work, that makes for kind of many challenges. But like situations like that where I always hear it from people when like they apply for jobs, and you know, I'm with them sometimes, or I'm on the end of an email when they go, you know what, I just missed out on a job, you know, good feedback, hey, I was the second best person, etc., etc. And they're just looking for their first break. And what they almost always say when they've been unsuccessful is that I just want someone to take a chance on me, to turn around to me and go, you know what, you're my guy. Why don't you come work with us? And having an individual like Saru that's open-minded, you know, whether we can agree or disagree that how quick it happened, it was someone that took a chance on him. And that's what most people are looking for with that disability, is to, you know, have someone that believes in them, takes a chance on them, and helps them progress within a career. Or otherwise, there'll be an individual that goes on and falls between the cracks and never gets an opportunity to showcase their skills, their talents that they have naturally, that whether they're a security guard and they want to be that role, but no one's doing it, then they're not being able to do that, and the world's denied that kind of person. So I think Saru is very indicative of the type of people that people with disabilities and mental health are telling me they're wanting in their lives.
Well, and since you said that, I'd like to add on. I don't think it was necessarily, or I should say, I think it was on purpose that Saru is the one who's going to take this chance on him, because Saru, in a way, has a disability himself in his fear. I mean, his race is literally passing on fear as a trait, a singular trait, like Vulcans have logic, you know? So he is dealing with super high anxiety all the time, and he was given a break to come into Starfleet when he's the first one, right? Am I wrong with that?
Yeah.
He's the first Kelpian.
So. You're good.
So now he's the one paying it forward and giving someone else a break. And he does say he's going to heavily restrict where he can go too, right? So he's not just like, oh, here's the ship, go look at all our highest information and pass it back along to your Klingon friends. So there is some trepidation there, but I agree with what Lee is saying, that he's just looking for a break, and I find it very interesting, and it has to be on purpose that Saru's the one who gives him that break.
Yeah, but he found his break in Culber's neck. That's where he found his break.
Well, see, now I do have a problem with that, because you should still have to answer for your crimes.
Exactly.
Even if we believe that Volk isn't there anymore, then he still committed a crime. If I was, I don't know. I mean, you can claim temporary insanity and get off. Not off, but it's the punishment is different. So, like Lee said, it is a little ridiculous that they're just like, oh, he killed somebody. 2 days later, you're fine because you only want to be Ash. There should have been something in between there. But they rushed the end of this show to the finish line, so...
Okay, well, one thing I like about Tyler Volk at the end that I think is very beautiful is that, yeah, Saru gives him this chance because he is trusting and giving Tyler his break. And so we see Tyler go into his work. And I know when I get stressed, and I know this is nothing but compared, I haven't been through anything like what Tyler Volk has, obviously, but like when I get stressed and I'm start feeling like I'm losing my mind, I have to go back to the routine. I have to go back to work. I do my thing, get into that normal routine, that normalcy. Then that helps me to process. And I feel like that Ash Tyler is getting that opportunity by being put back to work. And it's through that work that then he realizes, yeah, I need to deal with the Volk situation. And then he makes the decision to go back to the Klingon homeworld.
Which is why, to me, he's still Volk. Because, like, that scene that I've said so many times that I love, when he's on the Klingon homeworld playing that game, and he's fitting in with the Klingons so well, like, to me, that shows that he is still Klingon. When he's doing that scene.
And he finally now is recognizing and figuring out how he's going to deal with the situation that he chose or was put into. So I think before that, like he should be, if you want to try him for the death of Culber, like he should be tried as Volk, but he needs to know that he's Volk. And up until that moment when he made that decision, he didn't know who he was. And I think that Volk was separate, that he didn't have control, that chant brought it out in him. So I'm not saying that he shouldn't be punished, but Ash and that personality should not be punished. And I really give credit Saru for giving him, that break that he needs.
Yeah, it's because I don't know, you can't have no resolution on this death of Culber. That has to be resolved. And they didn't resolve it. Like that conversation that he had with Stamets in the hallway is not enough. As a fan of the show, it's not enough of a resolution.
I think the somewhat tricky part is that there could be a resolution perhaps coming in season 2 in some way or another. But the way that he's sort of been written out for now, or he's left the ship, kind of takes away from that perhaps opportunity. And yeah, it was a very rushed end to the finish line. And, I think it takes away some moments like that, because I personally thought something like that was going to come. But I think that, yeah, we've been denied that opportunity through kind of perhaps the creative choice to take him out of the ship. But if he had been on the ship, perhaps that would have been there. So it's a slightly tricky one, I guess.
Well, go ahead, Patrick.
No, go ahead.
Well, it sort of reminds me talking about, who's going to pay for Culber's death? Where is this justice going to come to? Metatrex did recently an episode on The Conscience of the King, which I watched because I was reading a book. Thank you, Brandon. They were talking about how Kodos, he has changed. So can we, try him for the crimes of, this quote unquote changed man? I mean, can you change and completely be someone different, but still be responsible for what you have? I think that's sort of similar. Like Ash Tyler is a changed person. This Ash Tyler is not Volk.
See, I don't think that's a similar comparison, because Kodos killed these people. He left and assumed a new identity and is pretending to be somebody else, but he is still Kodos. He still did that act. He's still responsible for those. He can leave the situation and not be caught for 20 years.
But can he change as a person and be a better person?
Of course he can. Absolutely he can.
Okay.
But he is still guilty of that crime.
Agreed.
Right?
As Volk is, yes.
Right. And he needs to be punished for that crime. Right? Like there's a crime that happened. You can't just say, oh, he's nicer now, so we got to let him go. He's a nice guy now.
But I think the situation is like, it's not I suppose it's we've kind of touched on this, that it is a very confusing style situation that this character's in, that essentially by kind of a few episodes after that, Volk has been removed as such. He's now just memories that someone can access. But in terms of that, he is not a personality now that can overwhelm. So that when you're essentially off to say punish perhaps, this individual, well, Volk is kind of dead. You can't punish the dead. In terms of the Ash Tyler part, that was a part that was overwhelmed at the time. So can you really punish someone for that? It's very messy, but I think it would be unfair to make it sort of perhaps black and white because it is very grey and messy here.
Well, I think for me, the answer is yes, you can punish him. The messy part comes in with what is the punishment.
But who are you punishing?
Well, no, because Culber was killed, and
while
Ash Tyler's body was used, right? So whether it's Ash or Volk at that moment, he was there. He was Ash. He was Volk. He was Ash. Somewhere in there, a murder was committed by that body with one of the personalities. Now, so you can punish that, but again, it's not coming to a verdict of guilty. It's, well, is this lock him up, throw away the key, death sentence? Is it, well, they don't have the death sentence in the Federation, but you get my point. Or is this send him to a hospital for mental health issues? Or somewhere in between? Does he stay in jail for a year and then go get help mentally?
I think you would send him to somewhere for mental health. But I think, for example, that if we put every single Star Trek character that was possessed by someone or a crime or an act was done in their body from kind of all the way from the enemy within to, anything, the amount of crimes that have been committed by possessed Star Trek characters is crazy. So we'd probably have about 10 episodes each series where it's dedicated to, right, Captain Sisko, you were possessed today and carried out this crime. This is your punishment. It's a Star Trek trope, but it's very rare that it's ever been taken as far as murder. But, crimes and, acts of, treason, for example, have been carried out. Sabotage, these have all happened. And I think we should kind of take those into account as well when we're discussing this as well.
But you've got the point right there. Tyler is the invading identity on this situation. Because again, the body is Volk. Yes, it's been changed and shortened and whatnot, but Tyler is the invading personality.
Right. It's actually
we would
the
never
exact
accept.
Opposite.
Right. Maybe it's because they're our main character and whatnot, but if this happened to Sisko, right, then, if Sisko, well, if we looked at Kira, let's pretend Kira in Second Skin really was a Cardassian, right? I mean, she thinks she's a Bajoran, but, she turns out to not be. But I mean, Tyler's the invading identity.
Hold on.
Situation.
So then, this is a little out there too, but wasn't Jadzia Dax held responsible for a crime that Dax committed in a different body?
She wasn't held responsible. She was put on trial, and that's what the whole debate ended up being.
Right, but what they come to at the end of that? They came to that it wasn't.
Fortunately, it turned out that nobody ended up being, dead. It turned out to be that it was his own fault, right?
Never mind.
They didn't have to answer the question.
Right, but that's kind of the question we're having here again, is because these are, it's like you said, the invading personality is the quote unquote good one here.
Yeah.
It would be as if Sisko invaded someone, committed murder, then went back to Sisko. Would we hold Sisko liable for it still?
I don't know.
Not if someone invaded Sisko and committed a crime, should Sisko be convicted?
So the choice of words saying invading wants to ask a question. Do you believe that Volk had the choice and made the choice willingly?
Yes, he did. I believe that Volk made the choice willingly to have his personality overwrought with Tyler, right? He had
Lee, do you believe that?
I believe that while it was Volk's body, I've always sort of viewed the Ash Tyler character as Ash Tyler is the dominant mind in this body, and that it seems to be cracking under pressure of Volk becoming a more kind of dominant thing, and by the end of it, it's an Ash Tyler in complete control.
Patrick?
Yeah, I definitely agree that Volk did this to himself on purpose. Right,
because when L'Rell asks him at the end of episode 4 or 3 or whatever episode it is, she's like, this is how you can do it. What do you have to sacrifice? Everything. She tells him what it is, and then he goes it. And that leads to the whole flashbacks of the sexual assault scene. and like my interpretation of those now is that those were scenes between Vok and Laurel, but because Ash Tyler's personality is cracking, he's confused and thinking that it was him.
Well, that's just it. Now, are both personalities, I read it as those personalities were actually blending. Not necessarily that he was confused. I mean, it's coming off as confusion, but that those were two personalities, let's say, right, or two sets of memories. And if you took, like, say, two types of liquid and poured them into a jar, now they're becoming one complete. So it's actually, the cracking is actually causing it to come back to not being so fragmented. He doesn't have two anymore. They're actually now blending back together, which is confusing him. But at some point, they'll merge back together and he'll be able to figure out everything. Does that make sense? It doesn't look like it does by everyone's look on their face.
Yeah.
So, like if you took
that's just it. It's such a foreign concept that we can barely grasp.
Okay, so if you took
because it's so ridiculous.
You ever do sand art? So if you took like white sand and brown sand, right, and you poured it down, you'd have two distinct piles of sand, right? Now, as you start to mix it, you can still see stripes of white in the brown and stripes of brown in the white. But as you continue to mix it, that would just become one version of a color. So then it would be completely mixed. My interpretation of those scenes is we're in the part where they're slapping the sand together, making the different streaks. And at some point, he'll just have both sets of memories that he can control. Now, what he does with that, whether he's good or bad, or that's also dependent on what side of this war you're on too. I mean, if you're a Klingon, you don't want him to be Tyler, right? And if you're Starfleet, you don't want him to be Vok. So, but whichever one he decides to be, he's not actually going to be either one of them individually. He's going to become a separate person with both sets of memories.
Tuvix.
And what those memories do to influence things going forward when you can access both could be very confusing, but could be very kind of empowering for an individual.
Right. Well, that's Tuvix, or again, even with the Dax,
Odo and Dax.
When Dax goes into somebody, that person has now a flood of other information from other people that they have to sort through. And they have to find a way to make that part of them without it destroying them.
Yeah, when he thinks of like kind of growing up, does he think of having kind of barbecue out there in California, or does he think about eating kind of fresh targ over an open fire and stuff like that? Like what was the real kind of memory and stuff like that? And I can imagine him having sort of, those overwhelming ones of kind of, thoughts and stuff. And I can imagine him perhaps going, right, there's this whole mess, but I want to be, this individual, and I'm going to make new memories now, but I can always look back on these memories, and whether they're true or not is open to interpretation to him.
And could his use later on be the impetus that starts to bring these two cultures back towards one another, opposed to apart from one another? Because he actually can say, wow, you guys really aren't that different from we are. We want to stay Klingon, we want to keep our traditions, but well, look, we do the same kind of thing with different animals, or in the barbecue scenario, or we play games, maybe not baseball, but we have games that we play, and so do your children.
Wouldn't that be very Star Trek as well? That's something that we've done from the very beginning with Vulcan and Spock. So I think that would be a really interesting angle.
Mm-hmm. See, Patrick, going back to what you said about Dax, though, this is different than that, because with Dax, it's a melding of personalities, and with this, it's a suppression of a personality.
At first, but I'm talking about now that we've broken that wall. This is, I saw just that those sets of scenes was the start of the melding of two personalities. Not necessarily that he's just confused, but that he is confused at the moment, but that this is not going to end where he can't figure it out. It's just that he can't figure these particular differences yet.
So, Brandon, let me ask you a question. So you feel that this is Vok and Tyler is this overlay. Do you feel that in the future that you see that Tyler is going to be completely gone and that Vok will return to being Vok?
I think that based on how they tell stories, no, that won't be the case. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that the next time we see Tyler, because we're going to see him again,
right,
that it's going to be more the character that we've seen at the end of episode 15, right? But I mean, I said it at the end of it too. Had Tyler remained on the ship, how many episodes would it have been before we got the episode where the Vogue personality overtakes him and causes chaos on the ship? Because that's also a trope of storytelling, right? It's good drama. Oh, look, this personality is now reemerging. You know that had they decided to keep him on the Discovery, that episode would have happened.
Right, and possibly ruined any chance of using him going forward.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm personally glad that he's not on the ship. It's not that I don't like the character. I just don't want to see that story, right? Because
I think it makes for Yeah, I think on a creative level, I think, I'm personally sad that he won't be perhaps a regular next season. But I think for the writers, I think they would have perhaps boxed themselves in, and it would have been something they would have kind of have to kept going back to kind of in season 2. Whereas I think it being something that they can dip into here and there makes it for perhaps a more interesting kind of creative choice.
Yeah, and it also leaves the door open for later on where he could have spent next season working through all this, and when he comes back, we don't have to have this story.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Exactly. They can briefly mention it at some point and move on. You know, when he was on the whatever or at Starbase so-and-so, he became Vogue for a day, you know, and then we don't have to have a whole story about it.
So I'm curious to know, what do you think about Tyler's interactions, say, like with Michael? Like, do you feel that those were fake because he really is Vogue, or were they authentic? Lee, what do you think about his relationships with Michael?
Yeah, like I particularly enjoyed it. Again, maybe it comes back to one of the flaws I've discussed with the Ash Tyler character, but I felt them sort of falling in love was a bit rushed, perhaps. But I can sort of, then at the same time, I can think to myself, well, Michael Burnham, from what we've seen, has never really been in a situation in her life where her emotions have perhaps kind of dictated her choices, that she's come from quite a suppressed Vulcan background. And I think, like, it almost reminds me perhaps of teenagers in a way that, that first person that you fall for, or first kind of hint of someone that's perhaps a bit interested in you, he's a good looking guy too. Like, that could be quite overwhelming, and the emotions that you feel and the romantic attachment, I could easily see in that sort of scenario that kind of Burnham's kind of a teenager in that respect, despite her incredible intelligence, could fall in love with someone like Ash Tyler so fast and so quickly.
Well, Patrick?
No, I agree. I think they kind of were able to use the episode where they keep repeating time over and over again as
Magic
a little bit
to
of a
make
cheat.
The sanest man go mad.
What was the name of the episode?
Magic to make the sanest man go mad.
Yes. So they use that as a bit of a cheat to move along their relationship. And it worked for me. I don't know if it was intentional, but for me it works because every time they redid it, Stamets would tell Burnham something else then she would tell Tyler. So they were like one step ahead. Wherever they ended off, they took 10 steps in their relationship in that episode, but wherever they ended off was one step ahead of where they started. So the next time they were getting closer to that full 10 steps in a matter of whatever that half hour was. So I didn't really think about how quickly they got to their relationship. I mean, it is only 15 episodes, and I guess because of that episode, it put it back into an okay timeline for me. And by the end, I really liked it. But there was only one confusing part about the relationship. It was when they were on Pavo. He tells her, well, if we don't do this, the war never ends, and you never have to go back, and I can stay with you, and we can be together. And like 10 minutes later, he's flipping out. We have to get him. We gotta get Saru and end this war. Like it was just very confusing.
I agree with you. I like the sanest man go mad. I thought that was good for their relationship, and when they were on Pavo, that I did not like that episode with them. But Brendan, what do you think about his relationship with Michael?
It's interesting. Like, Magic to make the sanest man go mad is a problematic episode because of how quickly things progress after that. Because if you stop and think about it in hindsight, like, we got a lot of character development and we got a lot of their relationship advancement in that episode that we shouldn't have had, because that entire episode was a repetition of 30 minutes. Right? And in a 30 minutes to have that much relationship built, even if you're given the information, at the end of the last loop, they're only aware of the last 30 minutes. And it's right. The only person who's remembering everything is Stamets. So it's a great episode, and I'm not trying to put that episode down at all. It's one of the best episodes of the series, but going forward, the way the relationship gets this boost in this episode, to me, is problematic in the writing, because none of this that we saw happened.
So, real quick though, I don't know if it's used in Star Trek, but I have seen it in other sci-fi where when things do repeat themselves over and over like this, that bits and pieces get kept in memories that are kind of locked away, like kind of like
that happens in cause and effect, right? So it's cause and what happened in cause and effect is different in here, because in cause and effect, everybody's getting a feel of this echo. We're told the story through Dr. Crusher, and it's really her that's the driving force of her remembering things that are going on, right? And there's a couple other things. So they talk about it. They get this memory. Wait a minute. This is familiar. This is familiar. How can we change it next time? And it's the whole crew working together to try and solve this problem based on fragments that they remember. Well, in Magic to Make the Sane Man Go Mad, it's only Stamets. Nobody else remembers anything else. And it's all relying on Stamets to tell them what happened. Like, Amy, picture this conversation. Like, if I just told you right now that, we've had this dance and we're falling in love, you don't remember that. Right. Or you and Patrick are falling in love and you've had this whole history. I'm telling you it. Trust me. Mm-hmm. Well, again, after I tell you that, it's only 30 minutes later, but I had to tell you everything. Fine, you believe me, but still, you've not experienced any of it because you're not remembering any of it. So only Stamets remembers.
So in reality, to fix this entire episode, they just needed Burnham to stop Stamets Watson and go, I remember, you're going to talk to me.
Yeah,
literally, that would have solved the whole problem of the episode.
That would have solved it for me. But, again, I don't want to put down the episode because I love the episode, right? It just, the later on is problematic because of the way the episode was told.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But as far as the rest of the relationship, I think it's really fascinating. And I do think it's really interesting, the troubles that they end up having in the relationship. Like, she killed his leader when he was the Klingon.
Yes.
And now, once she finds out he is a Klingon, okay, well, what does that mean for their relationship?
Well, they killed her parents, so.
Right, and Klingons killed her parents and whatnot. But, again, there was that misstep in the episode where Tyler and Burnham have that conversation. And she's like, look, I need time to process this. And basically he pushes it back on her and says, well, this is your fault. You just don't want to deal with it. It's too hard for you. So you're just going to push me away. Like, I don't know. That was a huge misstep as well in the writing of the character that I don't think was justified at all, because the personality that I've seen of Tyler up to that point wouldn't have reacted that way. Yeah. And if you say that that he's still trying to come to terms with him being Tyler and Ash, well, then there's still Ash there, which goes back to my initial argument of he's still Ash.
Well, that was
Voke. Oh my goodness, now
Voke.
I'm getting confused. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, if you say it's still Voke, maybe that was Voke that said that. Well, then this is afterwards, and then there's still the problems of, well, then he's still Voke. I'm sorry. Oh, it's so confusing. Blah!
Yeah, but even if Voke is still there, I mean, that doesn't necessarily disqualify him from deserving a job or being on the ship. If Tyler's still the dominant personality, it requires more work. It requires, someone to work with him.
Accommodations.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that disqualified. The problem comes in is that he murdered Culber. And there was no resolution to that. That's really the problem. If that doesn't happen, I can literally just wash everything else away and say, I don't care that he's on the ship.
Right.
But the murder of Culber kind of makes that so you have to take a step back and go, but we didn't even figure out how he's going to pay for that crime.
So we just got to get him off the ship because now we don't have to deal with that.
Right, no, let's send him to Starbase. Let them deal with it.
Yeah. Except he's on, now he's in charge. He's what? Is he going to fall in love with L'Rell again? Because clearly, from my point of view, Voke and L'Rell were an item.
Yes.
Right? So is he going to fall in love with L'Rell and they're going to be king and queen of Kronos?
Yes. Make that happen. That's a good idea.
I don't know. That's a whole nother problematic thing as well.
It's sort of this, little love triangle that he's got going, Voke and L'Rell, Tyler and Burnham. How's he going to, decide?
It's that British accent. Honestly, that's what gets everyone, turns everyone's head.
Even in Klingon. But, and it is somewhat, I didn't think of it, but it is somewhat problematic that he does have so much fun playing the Klingon game. in the end there. Although I love the scene, so I'm glad they did it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a beautiful scene. It's the best scene in the whole series. In my point of view, is that scene. What's happening on Kronos right then is the best in the whole season.
Yeah, that's probably no, but it's definitely. I mean, if it's not the best scene, it's definitely up there with one of them. It's just like you said, it does throw a monkey wrench in this whole conundrum because it does show that he does like being Volk at times, or at least Volkish.
No, I think it shows his progression in deciding who he is going to be moving forward. You know, he's accepted. Yeah, he was, put back to work in Starfleet by Saru, and here he is being the Starfleet. But then, encountering this Klingon culture and having that call to him, I think definitely pulled him into that culture. And now he's deciding, gosh, I don't want to be just straight Starfleet. I think there's something there, in Klingon that is definitely I can be of value to. So I like that.
Yeah, but that gives a problem for if the Klingon culture is calling to him and he wants to be more, if he wants to head more that way, I mean, wouldn't that give more credence to not having him working on the ship? Because we're still at war with them. Or is that the point of this? Is the point that even though he wants more of the Klingon culture, doesn't necessarily mean he's still Volk and he can be part of Starfleet?
Well, look at season 4 of Deep Space Nine that Worf's brought on to the Deep Space Nine to give that Klingon perspective in handling the Klingons, and then he stays around during the war to provide kind of tactical and cultural knowledge that could be really helpful as well. So kind of Ash Tyler could play that kind of role as well with, access to memories like that of kind of, how do you kind of navigate through certain situations like that? Okay, we're up against this Klingon house this week. Well, here's some kind of background knowledge on that as well. He could certainly have an interesting role to play and could be sort of tie into sort of the Worf role that we saw in season 4.
He could, but is that what he wants?
Exactly. That remains to be seen. I think he's going to, I think the point you kind of touch on when the scene where he's kind of, he's almost kind of kicking about, a nice blend of both kind of in his long leather coat. I think that he's going to make an interesting kind of career for himself. And I think that blend of sand is going to certainly make for an interesting mix. Yeah,
no, I think it's possible. Coming into this, I definitely wanted to argue that Brandon was crazy and that he's Ash and Volk and it's okay. But the more I think about it, the more it doesn't make sense that Saru did it so quickly. That's what it really comes down to, that there's no answer for Culber. We don't know who he wants to be yet. We keep talking about it, with the assumption he wants to be Ash Tyler. And if that's true, then that's fine, but we don't know that to be true. He could want to be Volk.
He does want to be Volk. That's why he goes back to Klingon. That's how I read it.
Right, but then we shouldn't have had him working, right?
Well, but he didn't know. Well, okay, so I guess I shouldn't say Volk. We'll say Volkish. Thank you, Patrick. That he's going to create this new person based on the knowledge that he is Ash Tyler and that he is Volk. I don't think that he can go back to being straight Volk. I mean, that's impossible. He has this entire personality with these memories and experiences that are there. So going forward, he is this Volk-ish person, and he has to decide who that's going to be.
Right. So then then Brandon's question actually is more valid than I originally thought, because he's still like we keep saying, he wants to be Volk-ish. He doesn't want to be Ashish, Tylerish. He wants to be Volkish. So from Starfleet,
then I think that's where, for example, we could almost kind of tie it into that. The element where I was early on, this person should be entitled and supported into a job and into a role. And that is rushed at the beginning. For someone I say, for example, when I, have dealt with someone that shows some of the traits that Tyler has in terms of personality, I would be working very hard with an individual to get to know them of right, what are their passions, what are their interests, what their skills are, what their backgrounds. And he has a very unique skill set of, this security officer and kind of Klingon ruler and all that, everything like that. And I think that all makes for a very interesting mix. And I think like part of that would be Tyler, for example, exploring that. What do you want to do? What are your passions and interests? Where do you want to go with a career? And, trying a few different things, for example. So trying being a security officer, going off and doing this sort of, adventure that he's off to have with Laurel. And then sort of after a small period of time, coming together and going, right, you've kind of gone off and done this. What is the job that you want to do? Where is your career path and stuff like that? And kind of sitting down and helping him kind of carry that out. It might not necessarily end up being within Starfleet, but he could be advised and signposted to how to discover a job like that. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there, maybe to be kind of some creative employment advisor work.
But the problem with that, as you're saying, is that not everybody can be what they want to be. They're not qualified, they're not capable, they can't do it.
That's where you think you have to come in with realistic expectations where, like, you can tell anyone, like, nearly every single person that I would sit down and have that type of conversation with would give me a realistic answer because it's someone that's like, this is what I want to do. Like people, I think people past the age where they're like, I want to be a spaceship or a scientist or a rocket scientist, all these sorts of things. Whereas like, it can happen, but if you're like the same age as Ash Tyler is, very unlikely that's going to be your new career come tomorrow. But like, individuals sometimes just need that little bit of advice about, for example, I've had people come to me with perhaps something that's a bit unrealistic. And I can either break it down and say, well, this is what 100 steps that you almost need to take to get that kind of job. Or here's some alternatives or something a bit closer to you. Like, I'm here to support you with the job that you're interested in, but I'm going to give you some realistic advice and then we can work together to achieve something like that.
Right. But just give me 1 second here, Patrick. Like, but we can't have Tyler be security chief on Discovery when he's a security risk. Fine, we can put him something similar. We can get him working for, if he wants to be in charge of security, fine. He can be an armored bank car driver, or something like this. But I mean, like, he's a Klingon. I don't know. We're getting back to that argument where he's a security risk to the Federation. And by the end of the season, when he clearly is going back to live with the Klingons, that justifies and that proves that I think Saru made the wrong choice.
But I don't know necessarily made the wrong choice, but I think he made a rushed choice in a moment of kind of wartime. And I think that it wasn't a situation of a day-to-day sort of Enterprise D working away in peacetime. This was a ship where they needed everyone that they could. They've already lost their captain, they've already lost crew. I think this situation dictated taking a chance on someone like that. And then in the wash, sort of perhaps a reasonable adjustment in terms of a job could be discussed and discovered, whether that there could be some sort of training, for example, to find out if he is truly a security risk and, kind of diving in with counseling and mental health to discover, right, is this person truly able to is he an Ash Tyler? The type of questions we are discussing and we've only captured in an hour and a bit, whether like in a kind of session like that over a period of time would get to the bottom of it. I think that would be more realistic.
So I've been confusing people for an hour now, but I think I got one more, confuse everybody real quick again, and then I'll be done. But see, the problem is I think we're also talking two different scenarios because Brandon's talking immediately during the war and Lee is talking, what you would do in a peacetime. This is more akin to, like, say, all right, so we took in, I'm going to contradict myself here, so hold on. During World War II, we took in German scientists that were working on nuclear projects and used them to make nuclear weapons. That's what we did. They were technically the enemy, but we did give them high-ranking information to top secret security files, right? But what if we were to find out that one of those scientists were Adolf Hitler? We wouldn't allow him to continue to do his job. And that's kind of where Ash is, right? He's a Klingon, so we took him, and now we think we can get some of the information out of him, but then we find out he was the original the leader, or the second leader of that Klingon resistance. So that becomes problematic in and of itself.
I think you make a good point. Like in terms of, I think, what was it called? Operation Paperclip, was it? When they brought over the kind of the Nazis. I maybe got that wrong, but I think
no. You're right. I know all about that from the X-Files.
Exactly. So it's Operation Paperclip. Yeah, my X-Files knowledge was right there. So like the comparison to Hitler, interesting, but I think like take for example, things that kind of happen, kind of deaths and murders. Like some of those scientists that were brought over were guilty of perhaps a lot more than perhaps Volk was guilty of, and certain things that they oversaw, took part in. And I think there's definitely, I think that's a really interesting comparison. I wouldn't perhaps go as far as the Hitler thing, but I think with the Tyler and with some of those scientists, there's definitely an interesting crossover, and we did forgive them. They helped us win America and the West to win the Cold War, put, a man on the moon. Yeah, absolutely.
No, and I only bring up Hitler because he's the leader involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So Volk was not just a warrior. He was not just a high-ranking warrior. He was actually the leader once Takuma was killed. Yeah,
like he was second to Takuma. And if you look at the show, the everything about this boils down to the Battle of the Binary Stars, and Takuma is the instigator of this war with the Federation, right? They blame it all on Michael Burnham and her choices and whatnot, but that's the event. Like Takuma was there, and he's like, no, their messages, we come in peace, let's attack them, let's fire.
That's their battle
stepped
cry.
down. He's his second in command. He's his torchbearer.
Yeah, and he even brings him into his house, basically.
And people brought these scientists into so many other things. I think, it's definitely. I think that was a really interesting point there, Patrick.
All right. Well, we've definitely had a good conversation. So let me ask just your final thoughts and how do you feel that the Volk Tyler character improved Discovery for this first season? Patrick?
I love the way he progressed, as a character. I now see some of the flaws, but in my head, I can write them off as a lot of stuff happened off screen because I want to. Because I want him to make sense to me. So I'll do that. And I'll admit it freely that I'm just apologizing for the mistakes they made. They asked us to do that with a lot of things. A lot of people did it with a lot more than I have. So I think I get this one. But I do love the way his relationship goes. I like the way his relationship with Michael Burnham comes to be, with the one exception being their interactions on Pavo. But before that and after that, I like it. And I would agree with Brandon that that's one of the best scenes is when he does go and become Klingon again to play that game. So his acting ability was unbelievable because he played those two characters as if they were actually two completely separate characters, not two personalities inside of him. Because we see that on TV sometimes and it just doesn't work. He did it great. And I hope we do see him a bunch in the second season coming back for certain things that make sense,
Yeah. Lee?
Yeah, I think my only real flaw with the Ash Tyler character is just certain things are rushed. And for example, I know it's been discussed to death on other shows, for example, but the whole plot twist, I never considered it a plot twist. It was something that was well telegraphed through a good few episodes. And it wasn't something like, say, Dr. Bashir, oh my God, he's genetically enhanced. And there was nothing before it. It was something that was, well paced and kind of seeded really well. And the audiences always expect, wanting perhaps a bit more in that sort of respect. But I thought that was really good. But I think Shazid Latif is a fantastic actor. You look at everything that he did in all those different episodes. He was under all those thick prosthetics and delivered a fantastic performance. He delivered a tender performance. You think of those scenes with the post-traumatic stress, the heartbreak, the horror at things that he was processing. He was a strong character. I mean, as an acting showcase, he can put so much on his reel from that first season. And I think that I would love to see him in some interesting stories in season 2. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes in the future. So yeah, and definitely check out Toast of London if you want to see Shazid Latif in a very different role as well. So I would highly recommend that.
Great. Brandon, your final
I'm glad
thoughts?
we talked about this character today. I think that this character in this story arc is one of the most interesting things about this season. And I think it's the most interesting story arc to look at. for a character throughout the whole season, because there's so many levels to it and there's so much going on. I think there's problematic elements for the whole season, but it's really interesting to look at, and I think it's an area that's rich for discussion. And we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, like, there's so many other interactions that he has with other characters that we haven't even touched on yet. We haven't even touched upon the surgery itself, and what does that all mean? And, there's so much more here. Like, we could talk about this again and not duplicate any part of this discussion. We could talk for another hour and 20 minutes about it. So, I like it. I think for the most part, it was really well done. In this episode, I've said I've had my problems with it, but I mean, it's still really interesting and really fascinating, and yeah, I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job in combining Voke and Tyler, because you have Voke bringing in this Klingon antagonistic character, and you have him being in a romantic relationship with Burnham. You have him being a dutiful officer to Lorca, and he just brings in so many aspects that really enhance the story arc overall for the first season. I think it is an excellent character, and I've loved discussing it with you guys. It's been good. Well, Patrick, where can people find you on the interwebs when you're not reciting a Klingon chant?
There's a few places they can find me. I pop up in the Babel conference from time to time. They can also find me on Twitter at MagicDrop5. It's one word. The 5 is a number. And they can find me over every Friday over on the Enterprise at the Warp 5.
Great. Lee, where can people talk to you when you're not pretending to be a Starfleet officer?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo. I have my own show, Filibuster. I've interviewed some Star Trek people recently. I interviewed Dominic Keating. I've interviewed Robert Picardo, and in the coming weeks, I will have an episode out where I sit down with Robert Hewitt-Wolf, who's one of my favorite Star Trek writers. So that'll be out in the near future as well. So yeah, you can find me talking about Star Trek sometimes elsewhere as well too.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick and Lee, for coming on. It's been great having this discussion with you. Really an honor to have you on The Edge.
Could I insert one more thing, actually?
Please, Lee.
Yes, I should have said that, obviously I mentioned that sort of my career is as obviously an employment advisor for people with disabilities and mental health. If you are looking for sort of that kind of, we are obviously regional based in Scotland and Edinburgh, but if you require sort of advice about kind of finding employment and like looking to sort of create sort of a plan to get back into work, for example, and with, in a supportive environment that takes into account that you're a disability and mental health, then you can find our organization Into Work on Twitter at IntoWork57, and check out there. That feed has always got some interesting and good advice, and if you're Edinburgh based and it sounds like sort of the support that you would need to help you get into a job, whether it's a security officer or anything else like that, you should definitely check us out, and we'd be love to help you and talk with you.
Couldn't get him to call it Into Work 47?
Unfortunately not.
Well, that's very, very good. A good resource to have. All right. Well, Patrick, will you hold on a moment while we discuss our next announcement?
Yes, I'll wait.
All right. Brandon, I fear this is a somber moment for me and for our listeners. You want to let our listeners know what's going on?
Yes. Amy, you're fired. No, actually, this is going to be my last episode as a regular host of The Edge. I'm going to be moving on. I've got something else in the works that's hopefully going to be coming soon. But I think for now, some of the listeners are probably going to be happy about this. Some of the listeners are probably going to be sad about this. But I think I've said my fill on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis for the show right now, and I'm ready to move on to different avenues of discussion. So, Amy, I'm loving that we had such wonderful months together, and I wish we would have had more. You had the postcard show, so we weren't able to discuss, Star Trek Discovery on a weekly basis together. We didn't get to do too many episodes together, but I am grateful for what we did have, and you're welcome on Warp 5 anytime.
Well, you will be coming back, I'm sure,
Yes.
as a guest of The Edge, and hopefully on postcards as well when that gets going again. So, well, Brandon, who's taking your place?
Who's taking my place? The good news is that you've got a wonderful co-host who's stepping up to the plate here, who's got a lot to discuss here. And listeners can probably guess by now that we've been seeding him through the last couple of episodes. But Patrick Devlin is going to be promoted to your counselor sitting right beside you. Is your conciliary, we'll call him.
Conciliary?
Yeah. Robert De Niro. We'll just call you Robert
I'll take
De Niro.
that job. Yes, thank you. I'm glad that I can fill that spot, for a co-host. Probably won't do it as well as you do, but, I'll give it my best.
He's a good guy to have. I like having him on Warp 5. He's a lot of fun. So, just don't take his nonsense.
Oh,
my nonsense?
I think he'll be a breeze compared to you, Brandon.
I don't fire people as often as Brandon does.
Excellent.
No, Brandon, I really do appreciate the time that I had on the Edge with you. We hadn't recorded too much previously, I don't think at all. So
Yeah, just
when
a
I
couple
came on
episodes
the
here and
Edge,
there, yeah.
Yeah, when I came on the Edge, I was just so excited to be working with you and everyone. And so definitely it's been good to learn your personality and your style and your traits and how you do podcasts and how you look at and perceive these episodes and relate them to your life. I really do appreciate all that you have to say, and I'm going to miss you quite a bit.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to miss you too, Amy. I mean, that was one of the things I was looking forward to the most when I was doing this show, was to be podcasting with you, because, you've got such a positive outlook and you're happy. You know what? I like that. I really do like that. So it's fun to discuss topics with people who are like that, because, sometimes I get stuck in my ruts and my opinions and I really appreciate the kind words that you said, and I've had a blast, but I'm ready to move on.
Well, and we definitely are welcoming Patrick, and so excited to work with you on a full-time basis now, Patrick.
Yeah, no, this is a great opportunity. I've wanted to work with you on different shows for a while. I've done a few, The Edge, the postcards, and we did a few Earl Greys at times, but we never did anything, steady like this. And now really on the network, I get to podcast with like four of the best people, between this and Warp 5. So, who's got it better than I do right now? Brandon, when you're not having dreams about being tortured and having your bones broken, where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala. I poke my head up every once in a while in the Babel Conference. You can find me over on Warp 5, which is here on Trek FM with Brandy and you, Patrick. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with a little show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, which is all about Alfred Hitchcock movies, and we're going through them in chronological order. And we had a wonderful episode. Lee, do you know who David Cairns is?
I'm going to kick myself. Who is it?
Oh, he's a Scottish guy. He's written some films and whatnot. He's written for a lot.
Oh,
for
yeah.
Yeah, he came on and talked blackmail with us, so that was a lot of fun. We had David Cairns.
Oh, very awesome.
So you can find me over there. But other than that, I'm keeping my nose clean.
It's been fun talking about Ash Tyler today, but this isn't the only thing we've been discussing here on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
And he's talking about how difficult it was and that he tried to do everything he could to stop what they were doing and not to kill all of those people, but he couldn't do it. And he just breaks down and he cries, and it's just like this really pivotal moment where the whole facade that you've seen for Picard for over 3 years is kind of stripped away, and you're seeing at his very essence who he is, that he's not infallible, that he has all these difficulties.
To the journey!
This is Jeff Foxworthy, You Might Be a Redneck If.
Oh, Lord.
If you fall in love with a hologram...
You might be in a doomed relationship.
If you fall in love and it never really happened...
You might be in a doomed relationship.
If you fall in love with someone manipulative...
You might be in a doomed relationship.
If you can't even remember your own name...
You're definitely in a doomed relationship.
The 602 Club.
I'm glad you said that, Matt. I agree with you. I think that it's teaching Jessica to still try to trust people and let them in, even though she's been through the horrible things that she's been through.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Also, and this might be me reading way too much into this, but I feel like because Tilly ends up being so instrumental in what happens later in the mirror universe, part of me when I was reading this wondered if in the back of my mind, Stamets is like, I need to have one person, and Lorca's like, oh, I want to make my own. Oh, Tilly, that's who you want. Yeah, okay, sure.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. That helps other listeners find us. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file on our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to show and select the Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Amy, when you're not trying to hold together two personalities, where can people find you on the internet?
That's great. Oh my gosh. Well, you can find me here on the network. I co-host Earl Grey with Richard Marquez and Justin Ozer. That's our podcast for The Next Generation. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place is on the Babel Conference. Listeners, if you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
We'd also like to thank our associate producers, Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoab Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, Cornelia Reutner.
Thank you so much for supporting Trek FM and especially The Edge. Tune in next time to see what's happening on the edge of Federation space.